Today we're going to be jumping into a little bit more Diablo 4, and I'm going to be letting you know all about the class changes that have taken place and how these will affect your favourite characters when the full game is released. Welcome back everybody. Today we're taking a look at Diablo 4 and I'm going to be going over the new class changes that we know have come about as a result of the community and the beta feedback. Now obviously the team working over on Diablo 4 have had a lot to go over, making several adjustments, nerfs and buffs to your favourite classes, but what exactly has taken place and when will they take effect from? Basically the short answer to that, they pretty much are in effect now, and as soon as the next beta comes out they'll all come into play, as well as of course when the full game releases. The first class we're going to be looking at is going to be the Rogue. Now the Rogue has had several adjustments but not quite as many as some of the other classes, because overall they're in a pretty steady place. They've had upgrades to their subterfuge skills as their bonuses for these have been increased, some of which weren't really used quite as much as the other skills, so you can definitely see why this has come to play. Also, multiple passive skills have had their bonuses increased. They don't go to state which ones, but obviously as soon as we get hands on with the next demo we'll be able to test them out. And lastly, this one unfortunately is going to be a bit of a nerf, and that's their imbuement skills have had their cooldowns increased. Later on into the game, especially late game, you probably won't have to worry about this quite as much, as there'll be several ways around it, but at the start you will be seeing a slight increase to their cooldowns, so you won't be able to use them quite as much. Overall, we found out in the demos that the Rogue was actually a very strong class, and these adjustments definitely seem like they're heading in the right direction to try and balance it out and allow players to try other skills. But going from a class that was already quite balanced I'd say, over to one that was just quite ridiculously overpowered, and that's going to be the Necromancer class. This class, if you played the demos, you'll know there was a lot going on with it. You could do some absolutely crazy damage, insane survivability. It kind of ticked all of the boxes at once. This class has probably had some of the most changes, and we're going to start off with its summoned minions will die more often, requiring players to utilise their corpses more often. This was definitely a problem. None of your summons actually fell over, they were so tanky, it was ridiculous, and now you will need to use the tools in your arsenal in order to summon them and keep them alive. Also, many bonuses in the Book of Dead have had their stats increase, which is quite a fun thing to see. That means they're going to be even more powerful, and the damage dealt by the corpse explosion skill has been reduced. This is one that was almost going to be guaranteed at some point. It was doing some significant damage, it was a zero cost to cast, and you could just see the whole screen exploding at some points. So no matter what, this was going to be adjusted over time. And finally, one that the community had been asking for a little while, the brightness of the skeletal warriors and mages has been reduced. No longer does it look like you're being followed by glow sticks, they've been toned down massively to keep the game more in line with that Diablo feel. Definitely quite a few adjustments for the Necromancer, but ultimately this seems like a great amount of adjustments, and the fact that some of the Book of the Dead now has their stats increased may make this class even more powerful in the right hands. Jumping over from a class that I would say was probably more survivable than it should have been, now we're going to be jumping across to the Barbarian. One that I thought was going to be the ultimate tank and instead seemed to actually struggle a little bit in the demos. But now it looks like they've definitely taken that into consideration, and there's been some great changes made to his class in order to make him much more survivable and better overall. Starting off, we've got a flat 10% passive damage reduction, and this has been added for the Barbarian class in general, with some skill trees passives having their damage reduced in order to compensate for this. Basically, you've got that 10% mitigation just to make you a little bit tankier as standard, but within your skill tree you've probably got a few things toned down. This works out perfect in my eyes, as you may not need to spend quite as many skill points in order to stop him from hitting the floor quite as often. Next, we've got the Whirlwind skill, now deals more damage and consumes more fury. This, although it doesn't sound that great, early game it's probably going to mean you maybe struggle a little bit to pull this off. Late game, this is definitely going to work in your favour, as you're going to be seeing those bigger numbers, and of course you're going to be moving constantly and taking things down easier with the extra damage. And finally, something that's good to see, because this skill was kind of pushed aside, and that's going to be the double swing skill enhancement refunds its full fury cost when used on stunned or knocked down enemies. The Barbarian class has a lot going on in its build in order to bring about these CC effects, so now the double swing skill may be a lot more viable. Overall, these are some very good adjustments. This is the class that I'll be playing at launch, so it's definitely good to see, especially for that damage reduction. I was definitely struggling at the start with this class, and I think overall these are definitely heading in the right direction. Next up, and a class that definitely needed some love, and that's going to be the Druid. A lot of players struggle with this class. It actually became a little bit of a meme at one point, but now you can see it's had some big enhancements and probably had some of the biggest buffs overall in regards to all of the characters. The companion skill now deals heavily increased damage, which is actually quite significant. As far as I'm aware, the companion builds with the Druid were definitely one of the strongest in its arsenal, and some of them could quite easily take out elites very fast. So this, depending on how heavily they have actually been increased, could now mean that some builds with a Druid may actually have swung a little bit in the other direction. All ultimate skills have had their cooldowns reduced as well, which is really good to see. Ultimate skills are very powerful in this game, so anytime you get those cooldowns, it's going to be very significant. Usability improvements have also been made to maul and pulverize, and lastly, using a non-shapeshifting skill will transform a Druid back into their human form. That last one I would imagine probably should have taken place anyway, but overall, looking at everything that's been done to this class, it definitely looks like they're giving it a big buff, trying to put it more in line with the other classes. Last but definitely not least, one that I would say is probably, even after these changes, going to be the top dog when the game fully releases, and that's going to be this class just here, and that's the Sorcerer. The Sorcerer has probably had the most balances overall, and I can definitely see why. They were ridiculously strong in the betas. They're gonna be very powerful when the game fully releases. Their skill tree, their survivability, their damage, it's all just very good. So definitely expect some balances and changes as they update the game. But if we look here, Charge Bolt's damage was increased and the mana cost to cast has also decreased. So they've given a bit of a buff to Charge Bolt. Decrease the damage of Chain Lightning and reduce its effectiveness against bosses. I actually hadn't tried that against bosses, so I wasn't sure how powerful that is, but there must have been some builds that could definitely utilise that. Decrease the cooldown for the Incinerate skill's enchantment bonus. Some of the enchantments for the Sorcerer were absolutely awful when compared to others, so you can definitely see why some of these are taking effect, because they'll want players to kind of vary their builds up a bit more. Mainly the Fireball and the Ice Sword, things such as that, they were a lot more powerful than the others, so there'll definitely be some tweaks on some of the enchantments. Which brings us to Firewalls, will now spawn underneath enemies more frequently when using its enchantment bonus. Again, like we said, enchantments, they're going to change things up, and they have for the last one as well, and that's going to be increase the lucky hit chance for the Meteor skill as an enchantment bonus again. This was something that I wanted to try for the Sorcerer, but when you put it on, it was absolutely awful, because at the start I believe it was around about 3% chance, meaning you never really saw this activate. Ultimately, it was a bit of a wasted slot when compared to a lot of the other enchantments. Another thing, they did mention it, but they haven't actually chucked any real information out about it yet, but they have said there's going to be some adjustments to the Hydras. I think they're going to tone down how many you can chuck out, or they're going to probably make it so they fire slower or you get less damage on them, because the Hydras could very much tank and pretty much solo anything that you threw them at. It was quite a fun thing to watch, but it did make the class very overpowered, so we're going to have to see exactly how they've tried to streamline them a bit. But yeah, overall, some nice changes for the Sulk, and I'd probably say expect a few more further down the line for the Sulk, because along with the Necromancer, they both seem like they were very easy to play and could dish out a lot of crazy damage without too much effort. Like I said, the game's gone gold now, so everything is in effect. But one thing you should be aware of, just in case you missed it, there is also going to be a server slam. Basically, from the 12th to the 14th, there's going to be another open beta, in which you can test out Diablo 4 again, this time being able to create and play your characters up to level 20. All of these changes will be in effect during that, as well as in the full game release. Right, you gamers, hopefully that's helped a few of you guys and girls out. As always, Wolfins Gaming, take care. I'll see you on the next day.